Hello everyone. This video is just going to cover a few sentence and paragraph revision strategies, some basic things that should work for any type of writing, things that you've probably done naturally, thousands if not hundreds of thousands of times in your life, but I want you to be aware of what you're actually doing so that when things aren't going well, you can say, aha, that thing that I usually do naturally, I didn't do it this time. And so I'll just offer you a few each day in these videos. 2 videos during this paper and a few more for your second paper. These are strategies you can take away for revision. Or we could even say editing, the very last thing you do. After your ideas are in place, you just edit your sentences, make sure they're efficient and short and all that nice stuff. So here's a few things. Without further ado, the first thing we're going to talk about is old and new information. And every sentence that you've ever written went something like this. The old information is first, and then slowly sentences tend to add new information at the end. And then what happens? This new information is restated in some way at the beginning of the next sentence, the second sentence, in a paragraph or across paragraphs, whatever it might be. So this new information that was added, our brain took it in, but it gets a little bit of it one more time right here. And it becomes the old again at the beginning of the next sentence. And then slowly, guess what? We're going to get a little bit more new information in the sentence. This new information by the third sentence will become old again to some extent. It might be the same word repeated. This might be, I like to say, a part or a piece of something we learned here. So, if it was something like astronauts went to the moon rock was different than the scientists expected. The scientists expected the moon rock to be harder than Earth rock. I don't know. I'm not saying that's even true. I don't know anything about the moon. But you can see how I went from moon to moon rock. Everything is kind of in a nice proper order, right? Here's a real conversational example from right here. I went for a walk today. We walked down by the river. The river was rather choppy because of the wind. Next, we might say something about the wind if we're going to keep this going. Or maybe we'll just keep talking about the river. That's old information as well, right? So this is how things have worked pretty much your whole life since thousands of years ago. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. What I'd like you to do here is pause this for a minute and read these 2 paragraphs. They are essentially the same. One of them you will probably prefer as a reader. So go ahead and pause the video now. Read them both, please. So which one did you prefer? Typically, everybody chooses number 2. Okay? That's for a real simple reason. If you go back and analyze this according to old and new information, you'll see that the first one has new information at the beginning of each of the subsequent sentences. Right? The one that you liked, that your brain really liked to read and that didn't lose you as a reader, has old information where we'd expect to see it at the beginning of each sentence. This is a piece about black holes, right? So let's look at the readable one first. Black holes in space. A black hole, so here's the new information becoming the old information we expect at the beginning of the sentence. Next sentence, there's the old information, the same terminology, black holes, the old at the beginning of the next sentence. We can even go to the last sentence here, and once again, black holes, the old information toward the beginning of the sentence. So our brain really liked this one. It was much more readable. If you took a quick analysis of this one, you'd find that all the new information, the stuff that was in the back half of the sentences down here, where the new information should be, is at the beginning here. And your brain did not like that, and thus you did not choose number 1. This is about black holes, and then all of a sudden we get the collapse of a dead star into a point. Oh wait, that has something to do with black holes. I wish I had known that before I started reading the second sentence, right? And this is what your brain is doing as you read. But guess what? It's what your readers' brains are also doing as they read your writing. So a great way to predict how readable you are and what sections of your writing are not readable is to do an analysis of old and new information. Now, not to shortchange this idea, this is pretty easy writing. I'm not in any way saying that you should have the same phrase at the beginning of each sentence. Life is too complicated for that. Rather, as I said, it's probably parts and pieces in some way. So the black hole part of it would break down. It might say like the gravity of the black hole, etc., right? So then we're talking about gravity as related to black holes, and that might be the repeated old information at the beginning of another sentence. But still, you'll have something that is closely related. Now, does it have to be the first word? No, it does not, but it's probably going to be in the first 4, 5, 6 words where you get that old information repeated. So just know that that exists. If we wanted to have some fun for a minute, we might take a look at this piece right here. Here's this should look familiar. It's the rhetorical analysis I wrote of Save the Whales, Screw the Shrimp. And we can see that first sentence, I'm re-mentioning irony, something that previously was already mentioned. Here, new information, something to do with commercial thinking, turning animals into products. We've got the quote here, so that kind of evades what we're trying to do. But commercial thinking, animals into product, we've got animals in there, so there's your connection. And we get back to irony and commercial mindset, the things we saw previously, and then the new information after the dash here. This time overriding people's ecological location in the food chain, right? And so we see that pattern happening here as well. If we just want one more brief example, I don't know why I pulled this up, but the New York Times Wikipedia article. Here we can look at this. The paper is owned by the New York Times, publicly traded, primarily controlled, etc., etc. Long sentence. Look where they come back to. Old information, right? It has been owned by the family since 1896, etc., etc. Nicknamed the Gray Lady, is the newspaper of record, the paper's motto. You could open up with the motto. That would be confusing. They could say, as a national newspaper of record, in the upper left-hand corner of the front page is the paper's motto, or something. And that would be a little bit more confusing, right? So paper, always that connection. Usually you see at the beginning of one sentence something that you ended with at the end, the last sentence. All right, so that is old, new information, one strategy that is very, very helpful, again, for the rest of your life, for all forms of writing. All right, let's extend that idea just a bit, and we can talk about thesis statements and topic sentences. I will put this document online just to give you a reminder of academic writing and what it is and how it works and stuff like this. But what I found interesting about this, you can page through the whole thing. You know what these things are. We already read about this. But right here, topic sentences often follow this old-new contract. So if we're talking topic sentences, this is a great thing that you can bring to make sure that your paper is well organized and that, again, you don't lose your reader by always re-mentioning what you've covered in the last paragraph as you begin the new one. And we can see here, if you just pause this video for a moment, you're always going to have the old appearing before the new across topic sentences. These are, of course, imagined topic sentences or thesis and topic sentences. We have here the important ideas, innovative approach to steel production. This is about Andrew Carnegie, of course, if you took a minute. And his personal fortune. So these things for which he is best known is the old, right? But we get this new thing, the tense working conditions. All right, what he's known for overshadows the tense working conditions. This is the new information. We'd expect the paragraph, of course, to be about this too. It's a topic sentence. Guess what, though? In my next paragraph, when I'm thinking, well, what makes for a good topic sentence? I might want to return to this topic sentence and say, what was my new info? That was actually the topic of the paragraph. So I work that in there, tense working conditions, now old, and I get the new inadequate wages. We can predict if we really want to follow this. Guess what? Something about wages, inadequate wages, in this case low wages, harsh working conditions, right? So we got both of these down here are the old before we get the new, right where we'd expect it at the end of the sentence. So this is something that all writers use and know. It works really well for research writing, the type of things you're asked to do in college and after college in the workplace as well. So I would really try to nail down this strategy. The only thing I might say is that your rhetorical analysis can certainly use this, but you'll notice even in my topic sentences, because you're doing 3 of the same thing, analyzing 3 of whatever rhetorical device you chose, you can get away with something a bit simpler, where it's more like a list in the second example and the third example, right? So when you have paragraphs that change topic consistently, which is most writing, this is a great approach to use. You might want to use this in the second paper, and I'll certainly remind you of this. So again, try to tuck this away. A really, really powerful, easy tool to make sure that you do not lose your reader. All right, the last thing we'll be talking about today are active and passive sentences. If you remember the terminology, great. Basically, here's the way they work. Most of the sentences that we write in life are active sentences. Again, there's plenty of research showing that people like to read active sentences more than passive sentences. It's easier on our brain. Most sentences are written this way. Here is 3 words. We can put these in 2 orders. John hit the ball, or the ball was hit by John. They're both showing that John was hitting something, but notice one put John first and one put the ball first. Notice that when we put the ball first, the ball was hit by John, we get a few extra words. John hit the ball, a little bit simpler and less words. Here's what I'm going to say. In any given sentence, if you want to make it active, try this first. You don't have to do it every time, but this is usually what happens in a sentence. It'll help your editing strategies for long sentences. Put the doer first. In that case, that's John. He's doing the action. John hit the ball. If it was the ball hit John, well, then the ball would be doing the hitting, right? So we put ball first, right? So just very, very quickly find the doer in these sentences. I'll pause the video. Now these are simple. We're just warming up the concept. We're going to get more complicated in a minute. But Mark ate the apple. Who's doing the eating? Mark. The picture was painted by Bob. Who's doing the painting? Well, Bob is. We could put that first in the sentence. Now we might have a good reason to make sure that Bob is at the end. Maybe we were talking about the picture. I really liked the picture. The picture was painted by Bob. So there's maybe a good reason for this sentence. Linked to old new information, right? But if you want it to be active, we'd put Bob first. He's the doer. Tina did the opening, right? Mr. Thomas used the phone, etc., etc. So that is the simple form of putting the doer first, active sentences. Things become more complicated when we look at college level sentences. Here are a few, right? Here, right? Go ahead and try to find the doer in these sentences, either mentally or actually write this out. All right, so we can look for what's performing the action in these long sentences, or we can look for the verb as well. Either one of those will work. So this is very academic. What usually is the doer in an academic paper in a sentence like this? This paper, or I argue that, or this paper will argue that, or this paper discusses. So you can see where this one comes from. Kind of buried in the middle here, but we pulled it out, put it at the beginning to make it active. More typical sentence. It reads better, certainly. This version, definitely better than this version, not so jumbled. Nothing wrong with this sentence here. If we wanted to make it active, though, we might say, well, here's my main verb, promoting, right? There's really no other good verbs. I see an is and an is. Those are linking verbs, not as strong as promoting, promoted. So what's doing the promoting here? Commercials. Commercials also promote alcohol consumption. That's all you got to do. Put the doer first, then your verb. You're always going to have a great sentence. Here's an interesting one. That people are scared of climate change is not about which I agree with. We can go, I agree. What's doing the agreeing? The I is that people are scared of climate change. This is really interesting for complicated sentences. There's actually 2 doers in here and 2 good verbs, the agreeing, but also the scaring. We can say, what's doing the scaring? Who's the doer that does the scaring? Oh, it's climate change doing the scaring. Well, I should probably put climate change, the noun, before the verb scare. And I get this nice, short, sweet sentence when I do that. I agree, climate change scares people, right? Here's your doer for agree, first major verb. Here's your doer for the second major verb, scares, right? And ta-da, you've got a really, really great sentence. It's way better than this one. Now, there might be a reason to write some of these other sentences, but in general, if you don't have a good reason to, then go with these, right? Just briefly want to point out, not every sentence has a doer. That's not bad. In the U.S., minorities are marginalized. Well, who's doing the marginalizing? We don't know. We're missing a doer, and that's not bad. However, you might want to include it. Sometimes you don't want to include a doer because it gets you out of a sticky situation where you don't want to label someone as the problem or the doer, right? But we can see some examples here if you take a peek at omitted doers but we could add a doer in. I'll maybe just add that if you've ever had a teacher, professor, write down who, rather than where or how or why or something like this. This is what they were getting at. The active sentences make you name who is responsible for actions. And so in that way, they're a really, really great thing to include as they're very succinct and accurate in your thinking. Let's very briefly look at this pattern in longer sentences. Pause the video and take a look at the doers and the active verbs here in this this example from MLK. Notice that in this long example, everything in here is doer followed by verb, you deplore. Statement fails, even if there's stuff in the middle here. Statement fails, and conditions brought. Let's do one more long sentence and find these patterns one more time. So find the doers followed by the verbs in here. Note that even in long sentences at the professional level, what do we have going here? Lots of doers followed quickly by their verbs all the way through. Makes this long sentence very easy to read. I'll leave you with a list of popular categories of doers and a rhetorical analysis.